Kapustin Yar, a top-secret military facility located 60 miles southeast of the former Stalingrad and 500 miles south of Moscow. Built under the personal direction of Joseph Stalin, it is Russia's oldest and largest military facility. Its activities over the past 60 years have fueled controversy over what really goes on behind these walls.
Kapustin Yar, or Vladimirovka, as initially it was called. It was, and it still is the first Russian space range. I am Vladimir Semenov, and I was with KGB for 26 years.
Kapustin Yar, everything was top secret. It was nothing there not secret. I am Sergei Khrushchev's son and former Prime Minister of Soviet Union Nikita Khrushchev.
Less than a year after the Roswell crash made headlines around the world, many believe that this Russian base may have experienced a landmark UFO encounter and crash of its own. June 19, 1948, early evening. According to reports, Kapustin Yar's air traffic controller sees a strange object appear on his radar screen. At the exact same moment, a MiG pilot about 10 kilometers downrange from the base sees a large, silver, cigar-shaped UFO directly in front of him. He radios back to the base that he's being blinded by a bright light.
A Russian pilot encountered a UFO in 1948 and tried to attack it with extremely unfortunate results for both. The pilot was blinded by rays of light emanating from the UFO.
It is believed that under direct orders from Soviet Air Force Commander-in-Chief Zyugarov, the pilot engaged the UFO for almost 3 minutes before launching a missile that was finally able to bring the object down. But unlike Roswell, this crash never made the papers.
It's 1948, it's a secret air base. Suddenly a cylinder appears over Russia's most sensitive air base. They scramble the MiGs. It's a dogfight. Russian pilots are good. And imagine this plane getting right on top of that craft. The MiGs fire their rockets as the directed particle beam weapon explodes the MiG, and they both go down.
Reports suggest that the blinded pilot, in his final attempt to regain control of his MiG, was hit by the object's weapons and perished along with his airplane.
What did the aliens use? What were they firing? What they were probably using was a particle beam weapon. We know what the MiG used. It was the things that the Russians were using at the time. It was firing its guns, it was firing its rockets, and it was firing some very early version of a missile. Somehow, that MiG was able to break up the anti-gravity envelope that surrounded the craft. The cigar-shaped object couldn't stay aloft anymore and crashed. And the Russian retrieval teams, overjoyed that they have their first spacecraft, jump on this thing, and they take it underground to Zitka, and the Russian secret UFO program begins. I'm Bill Burns, publisher of UFO magazine.
Let's face it, everybody wants to get his hand on a flying saucer. It's a wonderful weapons delivery and defense system. I'm Stanton Friedman. I'm a nuclear physicist, lecturer, ufologist.
This 1948 crash is one of many strange events that has turned Kapustin Yar into an even more mystifying version of America's Roswell and Area 51.
The Soviets had to get their hands on what we had. We had the Roswell crash. We really had a storehouse of technology that we developed in the early 1960s out of Roswell. The Russians didn't have that. Well, how do you get that technology? It doesn't just fall out of the sky. You go after it. And the Russians went after it by embarking on suicide missions. Anything they could do to get their MiG pilots to shoot down an extraterrestrial spacecraft was fair game.
From the time it was constructed in the early 1940s, Kapustin Yar was cloaked in secrecy. It is a place where it is said the Soviet Union's top researchers, scientists, and military specialists were sent to develop highly classified Cold War technology and weaponry.
I know everything because I spent months and years in the Kapustin Yar working there testing our cruise missiles that we designed for the Soviet submarine to sink American aircraft carriers.
Kapustin Yar was on a very short list of facilities that the U.S. intelligence wanted to get imagery of. There basically there's three things going on there. They're testing surface-to-air missiles, they're testing surface-to-surface ballistic missiles, and they're also testing air-launched missiles, cruise missiles. All three are going on at the same place, and so it's of high interest to U.S. intelligence.
In fact, the building of the base was so secretive that when a small town nearby was deemed by the Soviet military to be too close for comfort, its residents were evacuated, and it was simply eliminated. The name of the town? Zitkur.
Zitkur is a small town just a few miles downrange of the Kapustin Yar test complex, and basically probably what happened was the Russians decided that due to people seeing what was being tested, it would be better to just close that town off.
Many researchers believe the name Zitkur was subsequently assigned to the highly classified subterranean UFO research center beneath Kapustin Yar.
There is an idea that in Zitkur and Kapustin Yar there is a storage point for crashed UFOs and corpses of the visitors and members of their crew.
Zitkur is analogous to what Area 51 is to Nellis Air Force Base and Groom Lake in Nevada. Different countries have various places where they take their UFO technology. And what they do with it is they try to break it down. They see what it is and how can we reverse engineer this.
But long before the 1948 crash, the area around Kapustin Yar and the skies over Russia have been home to many other well-documented and eerie encounters with UFOs. Some date back to a time before what we know as Russia even existed.
Russia is a huge land. UFOs have been sighted over its territories for, I would say, thousands of years. I am Paul Stonehill, co-author of UFO USSR. One, which is quite famous, was sighted back about 950 AC by an international traveler of the time, Ibn Fadlan. He and his co-travelers were able to see strange sightings in the sky that scared them immensely. But the local people would laugh at them and say, we see it quite often. Aerial battles, beings fighting each other, strange aircraft, something that's similar to a Star Wars battle scene from a modern movie. Amazing stuff.
Legend has it that the spectacular aerial battles that played out in the skies gave the Arab warriors strength and courage to defeat their enemies during the next day's fight. In the 17th century, Russia experienced a rash of UFO sightings. These objects were described by many who witnessed them as comet-shaped balls of fire.
The most famous one would be the Rob Ozero incident, when a very unusual, huge fiery disc arrived in the area of a northern Russian lake.
One eyewitness submitted the following account.
On this, the 15th day of August in the year 1663, a great crash sounded out from the heavens. Around the stroke of midday, there descended upon Robo Zero a great ball of fire from the clearest of skies. In front of the fire, there were two fiery beams. It went from south to the west and was about 500 meters away when it vanished. But once again it returned, staying over Robo Zero for 1 hour and a half, filling all those who saw it with a great dread.
This documented account goes on to detail fishermen scalded by the burning lake, along with glowing fish that flung themselves onto the ground to escape the looming fireball.
Stories like what they saw over Robo Zero were common in pre-revolutionary Russia and outside of Russia in Europe.
When we speak specifically of sightings on the territory of the Soviet Union, percentages are very high, more than 50%, that these UFO sightings would be some sort of fiery, sphere-shaped UFO.
Another extraordinary sighting took place over Moscow in 1892. An eyewitness report was later published in the March 17, 1892 edition of the Russian newspaper Svet.
The pillar of light was pointed straight down to the earth, forming a cone-shaped bundle of rays in the color of ordinary flames. The brightness was considerable and can sometimes be compared to the brightness of an electrical street lamp. The point from which the rays originated didn't move during the whole time, and the rays were visible for 20 to 25 minutes.
While enormous fireballs have been sighted over Russia for centuries, there have been none bigger or more devastating than the event that leveled the Siberian forest of Tunguska in 1908.
And of course it was one of the theories which have to appear that it was not a comet, it was not meteorite, that in reality it was a spacecraft.
Coming up, did a UFO explode over Tunguska.
It is believed that not one but two objects collided over the Tunguska in 1908, equal to many Hiroshimas.
And later, what happened to the wreckage of the 1948 crash at Russia's Roswell?
Hurtling through the solar system, a streak of cosmic dust strikes the Earth. Commonly, these meteors are vaporized by friction in the atmosphere. This is part of the story of one that wasn't. A meteor that landed in 1908 in Siberia with the destructive force of a cannonball.
June 30th, 1908, approximately 7 a.m. The tranquil forest of Tunguska, Siberia, was rocked by a deafening, earth-shattering explosion. The explosion packed the power of a 40-megaton hydrogen bomb. Large trees snapped like tiny twigs as the explosion decimated the dense forest. The effects of the blast were felt as far away as Western Europe and were at first believed to have been caused by a giant meteor smashing into Earth.
My own personal conclusion is that that was Mother Nature showing off, if you will, but that there was no intelligence behind what happened there. It wasn't a rocket, it wasn't a bomb sent to let us know that aliens are watching you, Earthlings.
Literally a catastrophe from outer space.
Yet UFO researchers say if this devastating explosion was the result of a meteor, why were there no craters found in or around Tunguska? It is something scientists to this day have had trouble explaining.
This was, let's call it an explosion, although some people call it an implosion. Whole kilometers of the taiga forest were destroyed. The event itself caused changes in the magnetic field of our planet.
The academic establishment is of the opinion that the Tunguska event was simply a meteor, but there are many facts that speak to the idea that it was, on the contrary, rational guided flight. It made a turn, which is something that a natural object or meteor could not have done.
What was it that could have done that level of devastation and not leave a crater?
Modern-day UFO researchers were not the first to suspect that the Tunguska event was the work of something other than a meteor. Reports suggest that Stalin believed the Tunguska blast was the result of a UFO that had launched some sort of experimental weapon.
Stalin was interested in the acquired information to determine whether UFOs presented an immediate threat to the Soviet security. That's why he used some of his top scientists to give him an assessment. Scientists like Korolev studied UFO materials.
Sergei Korolev, one of the Soviet Union's most celebrated scientists, would go on to become the father of the Russian space program and the man responsible for Sputnik. Along with Stalin, he was determined to solve the mystery of Tunguska.
These observations prompted him to finance an expedition to the place where the Tunguska event happened.
Sergei Korolev used his own money to send an expedition to the Tunguska area in helicopters.
Korolev never met with Stalin. There was some researchers who was looking to prove that Korolev really met with Stalin, but they didn't find any record.
Stalin presumed it really could have been a spaceship. He wanted to find the fragments of that ship, put it back together, and recreate the object for military purposes.
Initially, Korolev found that many of the physical scars left behind at Tunguska were still visible. But the most shocking discovery came in the form of radioactive metallic fragments found at the site. Debris uncharacteristic of any asteroid or meteor.
If you go along the flight path of the Tunguska object and continue past the crash site, you reach an area that Russian ufologists call the Devil's Graveyard. It's a 300 square meter area where not a single plant grows and animals die. It also has a higher than normal radioactivity level. This is a result of what might possibly be a radioactive metallic fragment from the crash.
The radiation levels were there. I mean, meteors don't come down with that level of radiation. So one of the stories is it was a mothership that detonated.
It is believed that Korolev privately told Stalin that the incident at Tunguska had indeed been caused by a UFO, fragments of which were still scattered around the area. However, in his top-secret official report, Korolev is said to have told a much different story. The official party line, Tunguska, was the result of a giant meteor.
The whole point was, if the information serves the bureaucracy, good. If it doesn't exist.
So where were the radioactive fragments from Tunguska taken? Some believe the evidence was transported to Kapustin Yar's underground base, Zitkur.
Different countries have various places where they take their UFO technology. Well, the Soviets basically had one at Zitkur, and it was where they could try to figure out what the technology is and how do we use it. And of course, the security around those bases is essentially shoot-to-kill security.
Was Stalin's team of scientists inside the underground lab of Zitkur using UFO wreckage to advance their fledgling missile defense and space programs?
They had a couple of people, men, at the top of their program who really pushed the space program. I'm Fred Kulik at Caltech. The head of the space program had direct connection to Stalin and later Khrushchev.
In their quest to acquire UFO technology to beat the Americans in the space race, it has been reported that top Soviet military officials ordered MiG pilots to shoot down UFOs as far back as World War II, a time just before the Russian Roswell crash of 1948.
So that gives you a two-pronged concern about UFOs. One, you want the new technology to top the other guy's flying technology. And two, we need to be on the alert for new stuff from them. So either way, you want your guys to shoot them down.
As the word spread that UFO wreckage from Tunguska and the 1948 incident were being studied at Zitkur, Russia's Cold War enemies were becoming more and more intrigued by what might be going on above and below the top-secret military base.
The CIA had agents in the Soviet Union back in 1950s who had reported on UFOs, and the CIA was very much interested in what was happening in the Soviet Union.
Coming up, shocking, never-before-seen U-2 reconnaissance photos of Kapustin Yar. And later, an underground tour of Zitkur, revealing for the first time ever the base within the base at the center of Russia's Roswell. In the early stages of the Cold War, the Soviet military test site of Kapustin Yar became a hotbed of secret activity. Activity that involved advanced weapon, missile, and rocket tests.
So after World War II and the development of the atomic bomb, they were not able to build small atomic weapons. So they had to build big rockets to carry them. Unlike the U.S., we still had fairly sizable rockets, but we could miniaturize things to a certain extent, much better than they could. So from the very beginning, they envisioned large rockets, and that really gave them a start on the space program as well.
The Russians had one of the scariest pieces of paper I've seen at one of the 20 archives I've been to, said that the Russians have made more progress in the past 18 months in the development of nuclear weapons and methods for delivering them than had been anticipated for 5 years. That was in 1951.
By the early 1950s, rumors of UFO activity and experiments at Kapustin Yar had indeed leaked beyond Soviet borders. Alarming news that some say may have prompted the U.S. to find out once and for all if the Soviets had gotten their hands on UFO technology.
Kapustin Yar and Zitkur were at the top of our military watch in the same way that Area 51 and Wright-Patterson Air Force Base on Los Alamos were at the top of their military watch.
Tim Brown is a senior analyst at globalsecurity.org. His specialty? Interpretation of top-secret satellite and spy imagery for both private and governmental agencies.
Kapustin Yar was in the top 10% of facilities that the U.S. intelligence was monitoring in Russia, and that's evidenced by just the sheer volume of declassified documents that are available that show that there was a consistent, ongoing interest in what was going on at that facility.
Not long after the United States had developed its most sophisticated spying machine to date, the U-2 spy plane, the first mission was to, where else? Kapustin Yar.
This is probably the first time anyone outside of the CIA or the intelligence community has looked at this, the U-2 imagery of Kapustin Yar.
reconnaissance couldn't reveal can now be seen for the very first time in this exclusive underground tour of what could be the nerve center of all Soviet UFO activity, Zitkur. Based on reports and drawings from Russian UFO expert Anton Anfilov, seen in the West for the first time, this rendering is what might possibly be the first glimpse ever of this secret cryptic facility a quarter-mile below Kapustin Yar.
Let's say that you get a chance to go down there to the most secret Russian UFO laboratory. It's not glorious, high-tech, and brightly lit. It's dank, it's dark, and it's dingy. It's Russian. It's extremely compartmentalized. It's like an underground shopping mall, except inside the mall are all these rooms where there's exotic technology being taken apart and put back together. In this hub, they're doing autopsies on alien bodies. In that hub, they're reconstructing an engine. Then you've got these fantastic Rube Goldberg machines. What they are machines to test various components, and then finally you come upon these huge underground hangars. And what you're struck by is that there are no airplanes in the hangars. There are these long, cigar-shaped, cylinder-shaped craft in various stages of disrepair because they've crashed. And they're going to try and reverse engineer these. That's what you'd see at this base.
Is this the secret location where the wreckage from the 1948 Russian Roswell crash was taken, along with fragments from the Tunguska UFO?
I cannot deny rumors of the so-called captured UFOs. The Soviets tried to recover lost fragments of their secret tests, and it would be convenient to them to say, yes, UFOs is something that we captured, a UFO is in our hands, but why would they keep the secrecy on the subject of UFOs so tight?
And did this heavily guarded experimental facility specialize in reverse engineering designed to destroy the United States?
If Kapustin Yar is where you're doing your advanced development work, rocketry, aircraft, weaponry, laser weapons, all this kind of stuff, where you need high security and a good setting for your scientists and major computer facilities, then you'd expect that that's where they'd be doing their UFO, advanced UFO research, not UFOs 101. UFOs 404. It's just natural to do that. And of course you'd have underground bases. You'd have protection against intruding aircraft. You'd be looking out for the U-2s.
Another mysterious aspect of Kapustin Yar are the many strange patterns on the ground. Did Stalin and Korolev strategically arrange these patterns to attract UFOs to the base? Some researchers believe the Russians may have borrowed this idea from ancient civilizations, whose pyramids are said to have been constructed in geometric shapes and patterns designed to attract inhabitants from other worlds.
Looking at Kapustin Yar from there, there's a lot of facilities, markings, patterns that might, to the untrained eye, look like they're from another planet or not of this Earth. They might look like something that you'd see in South America with the Mayan cultures or maybe crop circles.
Between the reported UFO crashes and the ultra-top-secret research, how did the Soviets flaunt their advances at Kapustin Yar?
Now there was a new date for Russian youngsters to remember. October 4, 1957, when Sputnik, the first Earth satellite, was launched.
October 4th, 1957. The Soviet Union's space program successfully launches the world's first artificial satellite into orbit.
In the history of the Earth, no other event had captured the imagination of so many people as this first step into space.
4 years later, the Russians once again beat the Americans by launching Yuri Gagarin into space in the first manned flight to orbit the Earth. 2 feats that put the Soviet Union way out in front in the ultra-competitive space race.
We are the first, and all next steps in space for, I would say, for nearly 10 years, Soviets was ahead of the United States. First man into space, first woman into space, first walk into space, first rendezvous in space, first docking in space, and so on and so forth, until 1981 when the shuttle was launched.
I'm sure the Russians have done their darnest to reverse engineer anything they can get their hands on, whether it's American or German or alien.
Coming up, relive what many believe to be a spectacular UFO crash at the actual site in a village near Kapustin Yar.
I don't recommend that we stay here any longer. It's already harmful. Let's leave here and go to some place where no unknown forces can act upon us and influence us.
And find out exactly what the KGB knew about dogfights between MiGs and UFOs at Kapustin Yar as we open the mysterious KGB Blue file. Russia's foremost authority on UFOs is a man so legendary and popular around the country that he is known only by his last name, Azhaja.
On this spot of the UFO landing, an American group is filming for the first time.
He was very popular at the peak of the UFO activity in the Soviet Union. It was late 60s, 70s. At that time it was not permitted, but not restricted to talk about this.
Azhaja invited the History Channel on an exclusive tour of a reported UFO crash site not too far from the site of the Russian Roswell crash of 1948.
For that, I have to stand there, on that particular corner.
Using two copper rods, Azhaja begins the tour by testing the ambient energy that the crash site still emits today.
What? There it is, a negative sign right there. Down. Down there, that way. So here, in this spot, occurred the crash landing of a flying saucer. First I'm going to go directly across. Then I'll go perpendicularly. Then I'll go by the diagonals. This is where the boundary begins. All right, I'm going towards the center. In the center, we see a lot of plant growth and compact. And what's most important is that here, it shows a positive signal. Now we are going towards the border. Now they're showing neutral. And here, here's the other part of the border. Right from here to over there. Now I'm going away from the center, toward the other side.
Azhaja is walking the 100-foot by 20-foot outline of a cigar-shaped UFO that reportedly crash-landed here in 1961.
Again, now we're going back. It shows a powerfully strong signal. See how it's turning? It's powerfully positive. We're going back. Negative. There it is, see? Here's where the border is. We got one point over there, another point over there.
3 point and 4 point.
Animals avoid this place. They go around it. Cattle don't graze here. Yes, there is unknown energy, which, as experience shows, affects people in a negative fashion. Your pulse changes. The heartbeat changes. You grow short of breath. You begin to sweat. Okay. I don't recommend you stay here any longer because it's already harmful. Come on. Let's leave here. For a normal place, where no unknown forces will influence us and act upon us.
Azhaja's account of this UFO crash was supported by a resident of adjacent Shodnya village, who upon seeing Azhaja told her account of seeing the crash out of her window, which overlooks the site from less than 200 yards away.
Well, it was 4 or 5 in the evening. It was later in the day. And suddenly my mother screamed. She said, "Hey, look at that. There was some kind of ball, a sphere that flew by." And then she said, "Oh, it's probably a flying saucer." And it was a big, fiery red sphere that flew by. The sphere went over there, past the train tracks, and went down into the valley of the river Skunya, right down and over the river.
Experts like Ajaja believe that UFO events like this crash, as well as the 1948 Russian Roswell crash, caused a Pandora's box to open over Kapustin Yar, leading to what some have called a war in the skies over Russia.
Pilots would often receive orders from the ground to defend their airspace and shoot down UFOs. Other times, the UFOs would go on terrifying attacks.
What intrigues me about the Russians as much as anything is apparent dogfights between UFOs. And I've read several accounts of that, several of them having dogfights.
Perhaps the most compelling evidence of encounters between Soviet MiGs and UFOs over Kapustin Yar comes firsthand from the most celebrated of all Soviet test pilots, Marina Popovich. A national hero, a cosmonaut, perhaps the Chuck Yeager of Russia. She says that she witnessed actual battles between Soviet pilots and UFOs. One incident in 1964 occurred during a Soviet Air Force training mission.
Alexander Kopegin was the commander of a squadron and a pilot instructor in one of the flight schools. One day he was flying with a cadet and they were attacked by a UFO. They went into a spiral dive.
While on another top-secret military expedition in February 1980, Colonel Popovich encountered multiple unidentified objects in the skies over Russia.
I saw 3 fireballs, 3 amazing lights in the form of a triangle, and I observed them as they flew away.
Another MiG test pilot, Colonel Vyatkin Lev Mikhailovich, agreed to tell his first-person account for our cameras for the very first time. August 7th, 1967, 6:30 in the evening. Colonel Mikhailovich reports that his MiG was momentarily captured in midair by a UFO.
When I was making the aerial move to the left, suddenly from above I saw a light. This big disc began to slowly light up, and I just had time to quickly tilt the plane, but the wing hit the ray of light. The plane shook and the gauges and instruments began to move from right to left, right to left. It is as though the ray of light dissolved into shining little points of light. Imagine my surprise when my technician named Mikhail said, "Lev Mikhailovich, the wing of the airplane is glowing." As it turns out, for a whole week in the hangar, the left wing was glowing with a white light. They washed the wing with kerosene, and soon after that, the glowing ended.
Fortunately, Colonel Mikhailovich's encounter with a UFO over the skies of Kapustin Yar in the 1960s did not end as dreadfully as the famous 1948 encounter in the same skies.
No, I wasn't scared. I was just puzzled. I was particularly stunned that the ray of light turned out to be hard, because I felt the impact.
As UFO reports continued to stream into the Soviet government from both civilians and military officials, the KGB was busy covering up the reports, silencing those who made them, and clamping down on the press. But all the while, the spy agency was creating an official report on UFO activity in the USSR called the KGB Blue File.
Americans will never understand this, you know, because you have to be inside KGB to know the power KGB had. And during Stalin time, KGB was unbelievable powerful.
Written and researched over the 20-year span between the mid-60s and the mid-80s, the KGB Blue File was one of the most extensive official explorations of UFOs ever commissioned by any governmental agency anywhere.
The KGB Blue File is a 124-page collection of documents released in 1990. I believe this is not everything the KGB has had in their hands, and I'm not the only one.
The Blue File compiled thousands of reports of UFO sightings, dogfights, and crashes, all of which were described in vivid detail. According to the Blue File, as recently as March 21st, 1990, the residents of a dozen Russian towns not too far from the gates of Kapustin Yar all witnessed the exact same UFO sighting between 10 and 11:30 p.m. The following is from the written account of a KGB internal affairs officer.
After obtaining more exact information, it was established that a rather large number of residents in nearby cities became eyewitnesses of a UFO, and in several cases, 2 UFOs. One witness saw a ray of light emitted from the object that illuminated the Earth's surface.
If there are so many rumors and talks about UFOs, sooner or later government will ask its intelligence. What's going on, guys? Explain us. And KGB had to create this file with all the publications abroad and some witnesses who saw or thought that they saw it.
Is it possible that this 1990 incident could have been a simple military test sent up from the grounds at Kapustin Yar? Or was it yet another incident involving UFOs? Coming up, shown for the first time outside of Russia, exclusive footage of what might be the only recorded evidence of a fireball UFO crash. If the Soviet Union had not imploded under its own weight in the early 1990s, the chilling accounts you've just seen of close encounters of the first kind in and around Kapustin Yar would have remained yet another Soviet-era secret.
It's different because the time is different. You know, if you're talking with elder generation, yes, of course, no question about this. But nowadays, absolutely different. You know, younger generation now, they are living in another society and they have much more freedom.
This new freedom in Russia helped the producers of this program acquire, through official channels, this Soviet military footage you are about to see. Throughout the 50s and 60s, the Soviet military experienced a string of failed rocket launches and missile tests that resulted in one disaster after another at the base. Were these simply accidents or retaliatory attacks by UFOs?
I have heard a story, for what it's worth, and I don't usually talk about myths, but I've heard that 4 Soviet big launch vehicles were exploded on the pads by aliens because they kept trying to shoot down the flying saucers.
Hidden from view for 45 years, a Soviet military cameraman captured the after effects of what appear to be 2 fireball-shaped UFOs that reportedly crashed early on June 3, 1960. From what we can determine, not a single person outside of the Soviet military and KGB has ever seen this footage. 3 Red Army firemen are seen running from this massive fireball, which, according to reports, continued to expand, causing other massive explosions in the area for over an hour. One of the fireball-shaped UFOs was believed to have destroyed 3 Soviet rockets on their launch pads, while the other targeted and destroyed a rocket fuel depot, all just yards from the Zitkur underground UFO research facility. The charred remains of the 2 reported UFOs seen here were quickly sent across the base to Zitkur.
Try and imagine Earth as an undeveloped colony. And just like the United States and the Soviet Union fought wars over other areas, political wars over other areas, imagine the aliens want our resources. And they're fighting over Earth the same way the U.S. and the Soviet Union had conflicts over other areas after World War II.
How could all of these shocking events have been held back from the public for so many years?
The Stalin's time and early post-Stalin times, everything was restricted. So you was not allowed to talk about this. In Stalin time, they will simply send you to the prison.
Could all of these UFO accounts and the trail of freshly unearthed
anything like this, but once you see it, once it happens to you, you have to be a believer.
Bob White's quest for the truth defines the modern-day UFO hunter. But what exactly does that mean?
The term UFO hunter is a rather peculiar one because it covers an awful lot of ground. You can hunt sightings, you can hunt people, you can hunt documents. For me, it's a combination of those plus hunting an audience to talk to.
In the past, I've tried to focus on the government cover-up. And we'll talk about the FBI, the CIA, the Air Force, the NSA.
I'm convinced that this whole question of alien visitations is the biggest story of the millennium.
And Stanton Friedman would know. A nuclear physicist from the University of Chicago, he has spent more than 40 years in the UFO field. Friedman is considered one of the most knowledgeable UFO hunters. A relentless pursuit of the truth and a passion for answers is the link between the UFO hunters of today and those of yesterday. Are UFOs real? Was a question frequently asked by the man regarded as the original UFO hunter, Dr. J. Allen Hynek.
J. Allen Hynek is indeed the godfather of UFO research. This man had more experience, more knowledge, and more contacts in the field of UFO research than anyone, and I suspect more than anyone ever will have.
J. Allen Hynek was an astronomer with Northwestern University, and early on, when Project Blue Book had been set up by the U.S. government, they had hired J. Allen Hynek as their scientific consultant.
Project Blue Book was developed in 1947 by the U.S. Air Force to scientifically investigate the UFO riddle. Hynek was its chief civilian consultant, and he went in as a skeptic.
To this time, there is no proof that I would consider valid scientific proof that we have been visited by spaceships.
Hynek eventually realized that he was not given full access to the data. One example of this is the investigation of the 1968 UFO sighting over Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota.
He was asked by the Air Force to go there and investigate the case, and when he arrived in North Dakota, he was prevented from talking with the witnesses. So it was the fact that some of the cases, the very good cases, were indeed going somewhere else.
After 21 years of working with the government, Hynek's opinion on the reality of UFOs changed. With Project Blue Book ending, Hynek concluded that there was need for further study of the UFO phenomena. UFO hunter John Schuessler agreed. He co-founded the Mutual UFO Network, or MUFON, which continues today to investigate UFO sightings.
The Mutual UFO Network began because there was no place for people to report UFOs. We became a reporting spot.
Schuessler and Hynek garnered respect in the UFO community. However, another UFO hunter emerged from the University of Arizona's Institute of Atmospheric Physics, who used his credentials as a scientist to revolutionize the way his colleagues viewed UFOs.
Before James McDonald entered our field publicly, the scientific community was completely ignoring the UFO phenomenon. McDonald was the first prestigious scientist to openly declare his interest in this phenomenon. He startled his colleagues because scientists at that time did not go public with any interest in UFOs. It was a no-brainer, shall we say.
Ann Druffel has been investigating UFOs for more than 57 years. She has uncovered Dr. James McDonald's personal journals and has written the only biography of McDonald titled Firestorm.
He gave hundreds of talks to scientific groups on UFOs, and he would express in his journal that he had concentrated on the fact that the UFO phenomenon was a serious scientific problem. He was the top hunter, shall we say.
Jim McDonald, because he was so convinced that this was a major subject, managed to get congressmen to sponsor hearings back in 1968. 6 scientists testified in person, including McDonald and Hynek, and 6 more of us submitted written submissions only.
Following the example set by McDonald was UFO hunter Dr. Frank Drake, a professor of astronomy at Cornell. Drake helped create one of the most recognized names in the study of life in the universe, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, or SETI program.
The SETI program looks at the issue of, are there planets around other stars, and if so, then what is the easiest way for them to communicate with us?
With radio telescopes worldwide, SETI searches the skies for radio waves from other intelligent life in the universe. Dr. Rudy Schild, research scientist at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, believes that SETI has its flaws.
In my view, SETI is an approach taken by people who are very smart and who think that they understand alien technology well enough to be able to exploit it and to give us direct evidence of alien civilizations. Whereas UFO hunters are people who are also smart but doing the obvious thing that we always do when we see something we can't understand. We get out our cameras, our Geiger counters, and whatever we've got, and just make observations. And I congratulate the UFO hunters because I think they're going to get there first.
Have UFO hunters finally found a smoking gun? Proof of alien life here on Earth or even under the sea? And later, are humans being abducted and tracked by aliens? Exclusive footage of a surgery to remove alien implants may just change your mind about UFOs.
These objects contain metals which are not from this Earth.
April 24th, 1964, Socorro, New Mexico. Police officer Lonnie Zamora witnesses an oval object on 4 legs with 2 humanoids, less than 100 feet away in broad daylight. The object quickly ascends, leaving burnt bushes and 4 imprints on the ground. 2 days later, a nearly identical object is witnessed 150 miles away in La Madera, New Mexico. Both cases are investigated by the original UFO hunter, J. Allen Hynek, and his student, Ted Phillips.
I did start out as a skeptic, and I was kind of a convert after Socorro, New Mexico. There were 4 imprints in the ground where the landing legs had gone in, and some small, what appeared to be footprints. And this is truly one of the good cases, the very good cases.
We have looked at the work of Ted Phillips for years. We have respected what he's done. He's a person that, before it was popular, went out and started collecting evidence of landings of UFOs, what he called landing trace effects. This is physical evidence that something's going on.
As a UFO hunter, my job really is simply to gather the hard evidence to support UFO sightings. Over the past 36 years, I've been involved with or personally investigated somewhere around 600 cases.
Because of the amount of trace evidence, the Socorro, New Mexico case was a turning point for many UFO hunters, including J. Allen Hynek.
Allen talked about this case. He told me later that he began to see that something, in fact, was taking place because this was a daylight sighting by a police officer with other witnesses and the finding of physical traces at the landing site. So this is why then 4 years later, he suggested to me to specialize in landing cases, especially with physical evidence, for the simple reason that you can look at 1 million lights in the sky and it produces really nothing except 1 million reports of visual observation.
Dr. Hynek always suggested that people specialize. Ted listened, and he did specialize, and that's why he became so well known for trace effect investigations.
To this day, the Socorro landing is still listed in government files as unexplained. Phillips' archives are filled with cases that he calls significant.
Significant case would be one in which we have multiple witnesses, good seeing conditions, close range, plenty of time for the individuals to figure out what they're looking at, and resulting physical residue of some kind. In other words, the object is at that site and it generates physical traces on the plants, on the soil, tree damage. It can go several ways.
Some of the cases he's investigated couldn't have been done in normal ways. You couldn't have faked it, for instance. It had to be something unusual, unconventional, that flew in, landed. It actually changed the environment, and then it left.
I believe that we're dealing with constructed devices under some kind of intelligent control. And that's based on the data, the facts, period.
While Phillips may lead the way in land investigations, other UFO hunters are looking to the sea. Considering the fact that water covers about 70% of our planet, a significant part of the UFO research occurs at sea. UFO hunter Paul Stonehill has spent more than a decade examining declassified Soviet documents that detail such sightings.
When the Soviet Union started disintegrating, I decided to form a so-called Russian UFO Research Center to be a bridge between Soviet ufologists and their American counterparts. The Soviets knew that there were objects and phenomena that they could not explain, grasp, or capture. So they wanted to study it. Some of the most interesting cases took place in 1960s and 70s when Soviet submarine commanders would encounter gigantic objects, chasing them to deep waters. Huge objects would ascend from the ocean. Cigar-shaped objects would hover over Soviet ships, observe, move about at great speeds.
Stonehill specializes in what researchers call USO encounters.
A USO is unidentified submersible object. A UFO is unidentified flying object. The Soviet military intelligence, and especially naval intelligence, had been very much interested in the USOs simply because they wanted to assess the threat presented. They had examples, even back in 1982, for example, in Lake Baikal, when local commanders tried to capture one of the so-called gigantic swimmers. Machinery was destroyed, people died, human beings died while trying to capture the unknown phenomenon. And the Soviet High Command decided not to lose any more people. There was nothing they could do about the so-called observers. It's not easy to study the UFO and USO phenomena as it pertains to the Soviet Union and Russia. Secrecy has always been in fashion, whether in Russia or the Soviet Union. I truly believe that whatever is hidden in the files is fascinating to an extent that when it comes available, if it ever does, it would change the course of history of our planet.
But while some scour archives and documents, other UFO hunters explore well beyond the physical environment.
A lot of people that investigate UFOs eventually broaden their horizons, so to say. They get into metaphysics as well. I think they do that because they didn't get all the answers they wanted, and they feel that there's something bigger out there than the physical science that we've been dealing with.
One such UFO hunter is John Rixey Moore. Throughout the 1990s, he traveled the globe investigating a phenomenon commonly associated with UFOs, crop circles.
A fresh one definitely is a physiological experience. It's something that makes your hair stand up. When you're walking in one, it's very interesting to note that normally the center of the vortex that formed it is not necessarily the center of the image, the glyph. It's off-centered. If you walk with the lie of the plants, you get the feeling that you're walking downhill. You can get going too fast. That's the sensation you get. When you turn around and walk against the lie of the plants, you have the exact opposite sensation. You become breathless. It feels like you're walking uphill. Some people react so dramatically to them that they begin to get nauseous as they approach them.
UFO hunter Ruben Uriarte has also experienced firsthand the physiological effects that Moore has encountered.
Over the years that I've had the opportunity of walking into crop circles, I noticed from a number of other people who are also in the formation sharing their bodily sensations, some of them feeling very dehydrated, some feeling nauseated. Sometimes that has happened to me too, where I feel nausea. It's a sense that there's some sort of sensation that's going on with you. I'm a UFO hunter because I want to know what's going on. I want to know what's going on this planet. I want to know how it connects, how it affects us, and I want to solve the mystery. And through that, I'll do whatever it takes to get there. And that's why it's important for me to continue on this hunt for the truth.
Is this video proof that aliens are inserting implants into humans?
We looked, and certainly there was a foreign body there, which appeared to be metallic.
Can this tiny object really be evidence of an alien abduction? Nightmares. Strange recurring images. And missing time. UFO hunters say these are signs of alien abductions. Skeptics, on the other hand, argue these experiences can generally be explained by modern science. Still, much of what UFO hunters know about alleged alien abductions is based on eyewitness accounts. In some cases, however, there is evidence, but the abductee has no recollection of how it got there. At that point, UFO hunters, like certified hypnotherapist Barbara Lamb, stop looking outside the body and turn their search inward. Lamb uses hypnotic regression as a technique to help subjects recall and understand their experiences.
Well, hypnotic regression is really a very simple thing to achieve. It's leading somebody into a nice state of deep relaxation. And in that state of deep relaxation, with the attention focused entirely on the inside, the person is asked to go back to the source of whatever the subject is that they're interested in.
The use of regressive hypnosis in the induction part of this mystery is a very necessary thing to do. It's a useful tool. If it's done correctly, it's very valuable. You have to know more about the human psyche to do that. Barbara Lamb is one of those people.
I have regressed 480 different individuals. A person typically will come to me for hypnotic regression because they have a strong clue, or maybe several clues, that something very unusual has happened to them.
Under regression, these abductees frequently describe terrifying interactions with aliens.
There's a tremendous variety of experiences that people have with extraterrestrial beings. Those beings tend to do medical experiments on people, taking tissue samples, fluid samples, maybe taking hair samples, and in many cases they actually insert implants into the person who's having this experience.
Could physical evidence of implants exist inside the human body? UFO hunter Dr. Roger Lear takes the leap from the psychological world and studies the physical objects being extracted from the body.
I am a UFO hunter, and my job is to pursue research in this very tiny slice of a very strange phenomena. I've been a practicing podiatric surgeon for 41 years. I have performed research in a number of medical fields, and now I've applied my skills in science to the alien abduction physical evidence phenomena. And one of the prime examples of this is the Tim Cullen story.
May 30th, 1978. Tim Cullen and his wife Janet were driving north near Highway 59 in Colorado when they encountered what they believed was a UFO. Although they only recall staying at the scene for a few minutes, the Cullens arrived home an hour later than expected. 20 years later, a routine X-ray revealed an unexplained piece of metal in Tim's arm. Cullen traced it back to that spring night in 1978.
First contact was just telling me who he was and that he thought he might be associated with the abduction phenomena and that he had a metallic object in his arm. So we had him send the X-rays, and we looked, and certainly there was a foreign body there, which appeared to be metallic.
What you are seeing is the actual surgery which took place on February 5th, 2000.
Do you get a hold of it?
Dr. Lear supervised the procedure to remove the foreign object from Tim Cullen's arm. Although there was no original entry scar, a 6mm metallic object was found under the skin.
Once the object was removed, we find two very surprising things. One is that there's absolutely no inflammatory response by the body to the object, which is quote-unquote impossible. And number two, we find that there's a large number of nerve cells there that really don't belong in that particular area, and these nerve cells are called proprioceptors.
Proprioceptors are an active, living cluster of nerve endings. They are normally located in the hands and feet and respond to touch, temperature, and pressure. According to Dr. Lear, there is no medical explanation for them to be connected to a foreign piece of metal in the human body.
When we look at what happens in the body after the object goes in, the body does not like foreign things inside, so it reacts to it. Now, if it's, let's say, lead from a pencil or something like that, we get an immediate inflammatory reaction. But when we look at these things, there's nothing. Zip. Zero. So just from that alone, you can say these are drastically different than any kind of typical foreign body that we get inside. I believe that these nerve cells are sort of the plug where this thing is plugged in at, and it's using neural energy from the body to operate. On one case, not Tim's, but on another case, we fortunately had a piece of equipment which was a radio frequency detector, and we actually detected two oscillating frequencies that were being emitted from the object. When they are removed, they don't do anything. So obviously, plugging them in somewhere into the body gives them some kind of energy that makes them do whatever it is they do.
Dr. Lear has supervised more than 10 of these operations. Each surgery has produced strange foreign objects from the body, all of which can be found safely locked in his personal archive. The evidence collected by Dr. Lear seems to defy scientific logic.
We find that these objects contain metals which are not from this earth. The abundant amount of physical evidence available leads me to believe that this planet is being visited by intelligences from somewhere else. That is why I'm a UFO hunter.
Coming up, UFO hunters put their evidence to the test, and the results may surprise you.
My job is to separate the outright hoaxes from the cases which can't be explained.
And is there a worldwide cover-up to hide the truth about UFOs? One government official finally tells his story from the inside.
Pay attention, listen up, this is going on.
Ultimately, validating the hard evidence accumulated by UFO hunters is just as important as recovering artifacts. Whether the substantiation comes from science, metaphysics, documentation, or imagery, UFO hunters will not risk their credibility by presenting false data. Since many UFO sightings are allegedly caught on film and video, attempts to verify or validate the images comes down to researchers like naval optical physicist Dr. Bruce Maccabee.
I'm a UFO hunter, and my job is to separate the wheat from the chaff. For example, in the photographic cases, to be able to separate the cases which are mistakes or outright hoaxes from the cases which can't be explained.
Dr. Maccabee has authored 36 technical articles and more than 100 UFO research papers over the last 2.5 decades.
I've known Bruce for over 30 years. I find that he is persistent, he is consistent, he is scientific, and he doesn't let opinions come in so much as science. In my opinion, Dr. Bruce Maccabee is indeed a true UFO hunter.
Dr. Maccabee uses computer analysis systems to actually feed in and analyze each frame of a video, for instance, or to feed in a photograph. As a result, he has done investigations that stand the test of time.
I have done not only photographic research, but also historical research into the subject of UFOs.
Dr. Maccabee is convinced that photos alone can't tell the entire story. He believes that the U.S. government is withholding vital information.
I was one of the first people to try beating down the doors of the government by getting information out about the FBI.
J. Edgar Hoover himself says it is not now, nor was it ever was, the role of the FBI to be involved in UFO investigations. Dr. Bruce Maccabee filed a Freedom of Information Act request. This is back in the 70s. Got 1,600 pages of material.
When I got it and read through the documents, I could see that there was information in the FBI file that was nowhere else, including comments by Air Force people that were stored in the FBI file that you can't find in the Air Force file.
UFO hunter Nick Redfern sifts through thousands of government documents from around the world to seek hidden information about these UFO claims.
My background is largely looking at things from an official level, trying to determine what has been learned about the subject, what has been uncovered by, for example, the British military, the British Royal Air Force, the Ministry of Defence, and over here, the Central Intelligence Agency, FBI, National Security Agency. What drives me to investigate UFOs is basically, I think that at an official restricted level, there are people who know the truth about this particular subject. And I feel that if something so important and potentially mind-blowing and life-changing as visitors from another world actually coming here, I think that all of us have a right to know this. Based on my research, I'm convinced that UFOs are real, they're coming from somewhere else, and they're visiting us. And that's why I became a UFO researcher.
But are there government officials who will admit to what they are hiding? When Nick Pope, an employee of the British Ministry of Defence, began exposing the ongoing UFO investigations within the British government, a crack in their wall of secrecy appeared.
We got into it in 1950 on the basis of the fact that we were seeing UFO sightings in our country and that there was considerable public and media interest from senior establishment figures. Pay attention, listen up, this is going on. We believe that the UFO phenomenon is real. The significance of an MOD employee actually coming out with a statement that they believe some UFOs are alien spacecraft, I think, is to really get across to the media and the public that these things are taken seriously at an official level and that there are people investigating these things.
Dr. Robert Wood, former aerospace engineer and associate of J. Allen Hynek, analyzes documentation from the 1950s that alleges the existence of extraterrestrial visitation. Obviously controversial, these papers represent one of the most difficult tasks to UFO hunters: document authentication.
When you attempt to determine a question document's validity, you approach this in an orderly manner. If you have an original, you do the things you can do, like look at the paper. If you don't, then you look at the shape of the letters, and you go into the printing subtleties.
Dr. Woods is one of the leading people in this field, and the work he does in the forensic examination of documentation, I'd say he's probably the leading person.
The documents that I've been exposed to include 4,000 pages of mostly unclassified material, somebody cleaning out his file drawer who used to work in some intelligence agency. But a lot of them, maybe 500 or to 1,000 of the pages, are top secret.
Some of those top-secret files detail the Majestic 12 organization, a group allegedly established by President Truman to maintain the secrecy on extraterrestrials. Dr. Wood had the documents analyzed.
I have taken those to a typewriter expert and have determined that they were typed on an Underwood 1940 typewriter, so it's consistent.
Based on this analysis of the typewriter model, the paper and ink content, Dr. Wood believes the documents are genuine and may blow the lid off of a UFO cover-up.
The large number of documents that I've been able to accumulate very clearly show that we have a covert program to keep from the public the recovery of a large number of crashes that include the recovery of extraterrestrials.
Dr. Wood is definitely a UFO hunter. a good UFO hunter.
But do you have what it takes to become a UFO hunter?
The goal is to get the truth out there. Whatever it takes to do that, you've got to do it.
Though UFO hunters are gaining visibility around the globe, they have a perceived PR problem. They're simply not taken seriously. Establishing credible standards for UFO investigation has fallen upon MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network based in Denver, Colorado. This is the largest scientific research organization on UFOs anywhere in the world. They have developed a program to train those interested in the field to do a thorough investigation.
The job of the investigator is not to express an opinion, not to influence witnesses, but basically to keep his mouth shut, listen to what they have to tell him, and put that together in some kind of meaningful form. And you have to have some training to be able to approach the subject in the right way.
How are you going to go about doing the investigation?
The MUFON Field Investigator Training Program trains members of MUFON who wish to volunteer to become field investigators for the organization.
Kathleen Martin is the director of MUFON's Field Investigation Program and oversees the training and progress of over 1,000 UFO hunters across the nation.
We currently have no formal government-sponsored organization that does this kind of work, and people feel that there is a real need for this kind of work to be done.
Yeah, that's a good point. And
Peter Jeremiah is one of the many trainers involved in the MUFON program and is skilled at determining who could cut it, who is serious-minded, and who should be weeded out from the ranks.
Extraterrestrial vehicle. My goal for teaching others to become certified is to try to get a quality investigator out there doing the work. I don't want to see true believers out there that every little thing that happens is a definite UFO. I don't want to see that happen.
Again, is it better to get it?
If they follow the investigator's manual and do the research the way they should, the unknowns will show up and the other cases will fall by the wayside. My goal is to keep good quality investigators out in the field. You need to use your Bible when you're doing your investigation, because this is where all the information is.
Their Bible is the MUFON Field Investigators Manual. MUFON field investigators treat their UFO cases in the tradition of original UFO hunters like Dr. J. Allen Hynek and Dr. James McDonald. The organization has created a package of forms to help facilitate the documentation process and also a field investigator's kit with specific tools for the right job. The equipment includes a tape recorder, compass, maps, and a camera. MUFON director John Schuessler has a vision for the continued advances of MUFON. When a new investigator enters the field, he wants to make sure the level of credibility is maintained.
We require all field investigators to study that and to take an exam to show they have been through it and they understand the way of doing things. This doesn't mean we limit how much they do in the field. What it means is we give them some criteria so when we get done, everybody's talking the same language.
And then have them put it in writing.
After the training is over, the UFO hunters head out into the field.
Basically what happens is you'll get a report. First thing I do is call the witness, set up a meeting. I like to go to their place, I like to talk to them face to face, not so much on the phone.
We'll go out to the field with them, just if they have any photographic evidence, like camcorders or still pictures or any of that, we take that under account. By the end, our main goal is to produce a summary, a report, which then goes to the National MUFON headquarters.
Every year, MUFON investigates more than 1,000 cases, of which 20% fall into the category of unexplained.
We have some 300 consultants and research specialists in every possible field of endeavor that are able to look at this material. Those are scientists. And we go everything from astrophysics to religion. Back in the days when Dr. Hynek was doing this, he had an invisible college. These were people that were scientists that didn't want anybody to know they were doing it, but they would help him. Today we have a visible college that people are saying, I don't care, I'm going to look into it because I am a scientist. And that's truly what science is all about.
I was speaking with Anne.
Information is discussed and debated at annual UFO conventions, like the National UFO Conference in Los Angeles, California.
Cover up. I do believe UFO hunters come to conferences to learn more.
45.
They're looking for answers to what maybe they've seen, maybe they've heard about, or maybe they're just curious about. So I believe that some of the attendees are UFO hunters. They're seeking out the truth for themselves. He operates a website.
Symposiums, conferences, gatherings are always very important. I like to add that it's more the networking that's very important. It's important to hear what's the latest from the different researchers that are out there. But there's a lot behind the scenes, and these conferences provide the avenue for people to get together and to share notes, to share what's going on. And believe me, I've learned more from behind the scenes many times.
Regardless of their reasons for investigating UFOs, these hunters have one common goal.
I think it's definitely my job to tell the truth. And
what is the truth?
That is the prime goal, to find out what the truth is behind the subject.
I think we are mature enough now to take whatever the truth might be.
The goal is to get the truth out there. Whatever it takes to do that, you've got to do it.
As they look to the stars, the earth, or within the human body, UFO hunters feel their case is strong and the evidence irrefutable. As new technology, like the Hubble Space Telescope, identifies undiscovered Earth-like planets, one must wonder if the mysteries of the universe have, or ever will be, solved. But one fact remains. UFO hunters feel they are on to something big.
These people, their testimony could send a guy to the electric chair. And yet they report a UFO and they're no longer credible. And that's a double standard in this country that I simply can't understand.
When someone says to me, there's no physical evidence, I look at them with a dismayed look and would tell them that I'm very, very sorry for them. And they would say, why? And I would say, because you're so misinformed.
The evidence is overwhelming in the form of large-scale scientific studies, physical trace cases, multiple witness radar visual sightings, abduction cases. There's an enormous amount of data, and what I find is that the people who don't agree with me are people who haven't studied that data.
I think we have seen through the UFO mystery the glimpse of the future. We're seeing devices in our atmosphere that operate in ways that we can't and haven't been able to operate. If we could harness any one of these, it'll change the future of humanity. And that's really why I'm in it. That's why I'm a UFO hunter.